for my life upon the road. I'm still looking for some gold at the end of my rainbow. Yes, and someday I will find her on a Parkway blue blinder. On a Parkway blue blinder. Someday I will find her. Yes, and someday I will find her on a Parkway blue blinder. On a Parkway blue blinder. On a Parkway. On a Parkway, on an autumn day. Yes, and leaves fall like confetti in a New York parade. On the Parkway, on an autumn day. Yes, and leaves fall like confetti in a New York parade.
Welcome, everybody, to the Scenic City Sports Podcast on this Wednesday afternoon. If you have been outside today, I would suggest that you wet some kind of towel that you put over your face to breathe, because
no kidding,
the pollen looks like a yellow cloud no matter what direction that you drive in. But joining us on the show today is an old friend that really needs no introduction, but here he is with us anyways, and this is our good friend Greg Payne. And as we like to do when it gets to baseball season, I love to have Greg on to kind of prognosticate a little bit about the upcoming MLB season and, you know, where we think that everything might be going. I was watching a lot of stuff this morning. They were talking about disappointing starts for teams. And, of course, you know, right out the bat, nothing more disappointing than what the Bravos are doing right now. Yep. But it doesn't hurt when, you know, one of your outfielders gets an immediate 85-game suspension.
And that's the only one they actually put in some money for this winter. So you see that go down the drain. But you know, if you're coaching the Braves, and you were that close to getting that job, but if you were coaching the Braves, and you start out 0-7, you know it's a long season. Panic ain't setting in, but you are concerned with what's not happening, and they're not scoring runs.
Right.
They're 2 runs in 4 ball games, 2 of those being shutouts. So if you don't score runs, you don't win ball games.
Well, it's unusual for the entire team to be cold at one time. Normally, you'll have a couple guys get cold, but this is the entire team. I think at one time, Kelnick might have been the leading hitter, and he was like 179. It's.
Do you contribute that, or would you think this? Do the Braves do what they need to do to get sharp coming out of the spring? Or are they too busy offing games?
It's a great question.
Because I've looked at that lineup as it comes. He'll play his starters this thing, then he won't play his starters.
Right.
Did they get sharp?
I am very much of the I need all the reps I can get kind of school of thought. So I wouldn't want to take any days off. It looks to me like sometimes their spring training is what you said, is on one day, off one day, or you're not playing all your. I would, and during the season, Snit has always played his guys. He's always played his guys. They don't really get days off. So I don't know if that's a
could
reason
you argue
why.
that could be a contributor to a slow start?
I mean, it could, but I don't know. I just don't understand why every single hitter is struggling.
Well, and you can also say this in the spring. You see a variety of pitchers. You don't see somebody's 1, 2, and 3 stay out there on the mound for 5 innings. So you don't see that quality.
Right.
And again, hitting's a timing sport. You know, and it swinging the bat and taking BP and all that's good. But when you're not seeing really quality, good live pitching,
It matters.
You get behind with it.
Yeah, it matters. And I don't know. I don't know what it is. The Reds are not hitting either. I mean, they hit the other night, but they got shut out at Great American Ballpark yesterday.
I saw that. But you'll run up against a really good performance on the mound.
Yeah.
I did not know this. I wasn't paying attention. I think your team has taken strides at the manager's spot.
Oh, no doubt.
I mean, y'all went out and got a Hall of Fame manager.
Yeah.
And that's big.
Yeah. I mean, it matters.
Now we got to get some players. You have some.
Yeah.
You need more, but to invest in a guy like that, you had to be excited when you saw them.
Oh, I couldn't believe it.
Bring him down.
I couldn't believe it. I don't have a lot of faith in the Reds front office, and when they got Francona, I was like, "Is this a joke?"
I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me the other day because I was at a sports bar having a beer. Reds game was on. I looked up on the screen and I was like, because I hadn't paid attention to a lot of the off-season stuff, and I was like, what in the?
Well, he retired, and then he
Yeah.
had some health issues, and then he lost a lot of weight, and he was feeling good, and the Reds just on a whim just said,
Would you be willing? Yeah, would you be willing?
And he said, I think I am.
I think I will.
And
it may not last long.
It may not.
It may run a few
Okay,
years.
I don't want this to sound like the pulling up the socks and shaking of the rake moment. When we're talking about the timing and all that kind of stuff, and you talked about needing as many reps as possible. These baseball players today are softer than they were a generation ago.
Yeah.
I mean, not that they're a bunch of wusses. I mean, because they're, they put in the time in the gym and the stuff like that. But it's it's the fact that the things that we've all talked about before that, you can't have a pitcher throw more than X amount of pitches, and you need this and you need that. And I'm like, how many damn pitches did Sandy Koufax pitch every day that he pitched during spring training? Complete games? I mean,
Look at Nolan Ryan.
It just blows my mind.
So
What's the train of thought on that, Greg?
it's
To back pitching off, is it all because there's been so many more arm issues that people go under the knife, and there's more people on the roster that do throw 95 and up. You don't throw 95, you're probably not on the roster.
Right.
Okay, is that part of it?
Yes, it's 100% part of it. All they train nowadays is velo. I mean that's not true. That's a little bit.
But that's what it seems
But
like.
that's what it seems like. And they do these. They're not working so much on command and movement as much as it's all about velo. You go down to Lake Point and you're playing a game. What they got out there? They've got the gun. You got dads back there at 9-year-old games shooting a gun. What are we doing?
And does people get delusional that softer thrower, or maybe not the hardest, he keeps getting outs?
Yeah.
Are we just kind of like ignoring that part of it?
Yeah.
And saying, well, this was the guy with all the velocity.
When I was at Gordon Lee, and you remember these teams, the most consistent all the time pitcher I had was Dane Anderson. Mm-hmm. Dane could throw strikes. He had command, and he had good command. He had some movement, and he threw about 80 miles an hour.
Okay, that's true.
But he got outs. Now, Dane had a hard time with a really, really good team. Dane could beat a really, really bad team. Dane could beat, but a team in the middle seemed to hit Dane a little bit. Okay, but that's because that was kind of middle velocity. So, but when Dane went to Chattanooga State, and I talked to Greg when he went there, I said, look, he just gets outs. And that's what you want. But nowadays, everybody's so lazy in their scouting. They want guys that are throwing 94, 95 or whatever. But if you show me a guy in high school throwing 95, I'm going to show you a guy that's going to have Tommy John before too long, because your body's not made for that. And if now starters are going 5 innings, and they're throwing as hard as they can for 5 innings. Well, that's the problem.
And when the Braves would have Glavine or Maddox, mostly Glavine, he always referred back to that max effort, every pitch. Nobody's gonna win 20 games in a year. Nobody's gonna win 300 games. Nobody's gonna pitch a complete game because of that effort they're giving from pitch one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the guy the other night that pitched such a gem against the Reds pitched very much what they're calling a Maddox-like performance.
Mm-hmm.
Less than 100,
99 pitches,
and he went to distance.
Yep.
And just carving them up from a standpoint, we can't hit you.
Yeah.
Now I don't think he throws 100.
No, but he throws hard. But he pitched.
I wonder if Maddox, if a Greg Maddox type came along today, if he would get the same looks.
I don't think he would.
And I don't think
I think
he would
have
either.
to. I think he'd have to prove himself over over and over.
He would be that guy that had to get there, through the minor league system, showing that he could get outs. I mean, he couldn't.
He wouldn't be a high draft pick.
No, he
sure.
would not. No.
Well, and Rusty's liable to be 31 years of age before they ever
before they ever take a chance.
Before they ever say, well, this guy does really get outs in the minors, but why don't we pull him up?
And I hate to be that guy talking about the way it used to be.
Yeah, I know.
But,
That's what I'm saying.
But the training now is all on power, whether it's velocity or hitting or power in baseball. That's why the averages are so bad. The strikeouts are so high because everybody just wants to do maximum damage with one swing. That's not the way the game is supposed to be played.
No.
Well, when we're talking about the Braves, and we'll get off of them here in a minute, when Acuna's out of the lineup, they're just a different team.
Totally different.
I mean, they really are.
Totally different.
I mean, and there's all-stars that are in that lineup, but sometimes they just don't have a hard time playing like him when he's not in the lineup. That's how important that guy is. But me and another friend have brought this up. Because of his injuries, I don't know that he ever gets the contract that we just saw the boy in the Mets get. I don't think he ever gets that, and he was good enough to get that. But now, sometimes the best ability is availability.
Right.
And 2 out of the last 3 seasons, him not playing,
yeah.
And I'm not so sure he ain't got another one of those in him, and fragileness starts to creep in.
Yeah. He is. He frustrates me with some of his softness.
Is he the modern day Bob Horner?
Maybe.
Like every time you turn around, he's out for.
But even Acuna doesn't like to get a pitch inside. He'll be all offended. I'm like, the pitcher has to pitch inside. There's 2 halves of the plate. You have to throw it in there. But he'll act like that, almost like LeBron in basketball, all the fouls and overdoing things. Come on, stop that. The guy's got to throw inside. He's not trying to hit you. Now sometimes he's trying to hit him. Okay, for a fact, that's part of the game. That when you play.
Well, he does stand up on the plate.
He does, and it's going to come in there. And the Marlins hit him
a lot. Yeah.
And some of it certainly is on purpose.
And I was concerned back then that, he's going to get hit in the wrong place. He's going to get hit in the hand. He's going to get hit in the wrist. And, 100 mile an hour is going to break it. And here he's out for a while.
Just wear that suit of armor on your arm that Barry Bonds always wore.
How did I ever play?
God, I know.
I didn't have an oven mitt.
No.
I didn't have an elbow pad.
An oven mitt.
Has it come to this, though, in looking at, if you were you got the Braves in Cunha for probably a few more years, and then I think when he hits free agency, unless they extend his contract before then, he's gone. Because the Braves won't be the highest bidder.
They're not going to pony up.
They
that
won't.
Kind of money.
They won't.
Albies is in that club too.
Yep.
So they're going to lose both of them unless they extend them sooner.
And they signed them early enough, like they did with Michael Harris and Austin Riley. They signed them early enough to where they're getting their great years, and they gave them an awful lot of money, but they turned out to be a whole lot better. I mean, they were betting that they would be great, and it's almost like Acuna and those guys weren't betting that they would be that great. However, when he did sign that, you weren't seeing the astronomical numbers that you see now.
And you're also giving a 19-year-old $100 million.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're not going to turn it down.
I mean,
it sounds like a lot of money.
Not to. Obviously, I'm not going to try to talk NBA with Greg, but but you're doing the same thing. Like I was listening today. I was on my way to pick some stuff up, and I was listening to the Dan Patrick Show, and they were talking about how the average drive. They were talking about Dalton Connect. That's who they were talking about last year from Tennessee, and they were like, if Dalton Connect was, how was it they said if he'd have been 19, or he would have been from Europe, he would have been a top 3 draft pick.
Yeah, there was no reason for him not to.
Yeah, and they're like, but unfortunately, because of those 2 things, and then, who benefits from that? Well, of course, the Lakers benefit because he's the best player in that draft, just about. And, you got him in the 2nd round, which was an absolute friggin' steal. And that part is just, it's crazy to me. It always makes me think of the movie Trouble with the Curve. Those of you that are out there, if you've not seen it, that movie should be up in those top 3 or 4 baseball movies, because I
had to star in that movie.
Did you?
I mean, because that would have been
you had trouble with the curve. But there's a part in that movie where they talk about the sounds nuance of baseball, the feel of baseball, the instinct. Well, how did you know he could throw like that? I heard it. How did you know he couldn't hit this? I heard it.
Yep.
Every ball that kid hit, well, he's hitting with. Of course, anybody can hit it out with a metal bat. You can tell by the sound of the metal bat. He's not catching it flush. The stuff like that. We don't have those guys anymore.
No.
Those scouts are long gone and retired, and the guys that we have now are the bean counters with the computer programs that come out and they plug in 4 or 5 numbers, and their exit tells them this, and they get a little printout, and that's what they.
That's been going on for a decade.
And they spend millions.
It has.
It's the Billy Bean method.
Moneyball did.
When does it quit, Coach?
It's starting to swing back. Okay. So Philip Wellman, you know Philip.
Yeah.
I was I probably shouldn't say, but he was talking. He calls the data analysts. He calls them the nerds, and I think a lot of old school baseball people do call them that. But I was talking to him one time about launch angle, because it just frustrates me that, because if you start talking to a young kid about launch angle, what does he think he needs to do? He thinks he needs to swing upward, right? He thinks the launch angle is created back here, when the launch angle is really just hitting the ball out front. All it is they have a measure for it now, where they didn't when back in the day when we were playing. And so Tatis was playing for Philip, and his launch angle wasn't so good, and San Diego was concerned about it, and they call him up after every game. He gets the reports and all, and he said don't worry about that. He said, I'll work with him. And so he talked to Tatis, and he's like, let's just get it out front, and that's all he did. And he started hitting the ball a little bit better out front, and his launch angle improved, and everybody was happy. It's worked out okay. We overanalyze. Hitting is incredibly hard, but it's simple.
That's Philip Wellman, the author of the greatest umpire blow up of all time with the grenade throw and all.
We had to invite him back just so that he'll repeat that performance.
I have somewhere around in my collection of stuff. I have a Chattanooga Lookouts bobblehead of him.
And that brings me to something, Coach. And we're both traditionalists, I think, about the game. But your thoughts on bringing in the computer umpire behind the plate? Because as a hitter, not so much a pitcher, but as a hitter / coach, if it goes against you, you hate to see an at bat taken away.
Well, you're talking to a guy who got knocked out of a state championship, I will forever believe, because of the call that was a strike 3.
We've seen that call
that ended the game.
We have.
All right. But even with that, I like the psychology of it. I like being able to talk to an umpire and work some of that. Yes, you want all the right calls to be made, but I also like the human element of it, and I like the psychology of being able to walk by Nathan Cook and get in his ear for a little bit and then get a call. I like that.
You got him second guessing.
Yeah.
And you dropped names, too.
Yeah. He named names.
He named names.
No wonder that guy's out of the league.
So Nathan, let me just tell the story. Nathan was a good umpire.
Yeah.
Okay, he was.
Yeah, but
Mom had been sick. He was very close with his mother, and Mom had been sick, having a bad day, and he came out to umpire our game. That's a bad spot, and he wasn't focused, and so he wasn't his best. How's that? He wasn't his best.
Yeah.
And I like Nathan a lot. Yeah. I always have. So
He's my cameraman, by the way. Be careful.
So I'm not going to yell at him and show him up. I'm not going to. That doesn't mean if I ever yelled at you and showed you up, I don't like you. But I for certainly wasn't going to do that to Nathan. So I just walked by him, and I knew what was going on. And so I just got in his ear, and I gave him a little pep talk. How's that?
Yeah.
And the calls got better.
Okay.
So it worked. But if we'd had the thing, we wouldn't have been in that position.
Let's go back to when you was a player.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get it right.
Did you hate to have an at bat taken away from you because umpire making a bad call?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you hated to see that take place, just like you brought up in that game that you haven't let go yet.
No, and I'm not going to.
But also from a coaching side, you benefited from that too.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it's both ways. I remember telling an umpire, this is so bad. I remember telling an umpire, because I started for 4 years at Shorter, and I knew all the umpires. You get the same group of people there. We had a new umpire my senior year, and he called a strike on me the first pitch strike, and it wasn't a strike. It made me mad, and the whole at bat went bad because I wasn't mentally tough enough to overcome it.
On a batter.
Yeah, and so the next time I came up, I said, now I wasn't looking at him because you can't do that, but I said, I know that you're new, but if I don't swing at it, it's not a strike.
I bet he really appreciated that.
Well, I don't know what he did because I wasn't looking at him. If he was the umpire here, I said it this way.
Let me do something to balance this statement out. What was you batting at in order?
3.
Okay.
I mean, I was a good hitter.
At least there was an illusion that you were
that
guy.
The numbers reflect that I was a good hitter. Doesn't mean I had a great attitude about it, but yes.
But if you told me you were the 9-hole and you were telling the guy that,
I don't think I could have said that.
I will say, though, to shift gears just a second, and I don't want to be that back in my day kind of guy either, but it's that whole numbers mentality and trying to minutely pick every last little element has bled over into every sport. Mm-hmm. I mean, I deal with that crap as the golf coach.
Oh,
with
sure.
My kids. I'll give you a funny story. This one is.
It better be fun.
No, this one's really. It's so. A couple weeks ago, my 1, 2, and 3. It was a Friday afternoon. We didn't have practice that day, so my 1, 2, and 3. They said, "Coach, let's go play 9 holes." I said, "Okay." So they talk mess all day long. Oh, you just wait, old man. We'll show you. So I team up with one of them to play against the other 2, which, by the way, we won by like 8 strokes.
Sure you did. That's right.
But the one that I'm on the team with, he and I are in our cart, and we drive up to the next ball, and I get out, and I look around. I kind of look at everything, feel the wind at me, look at the flag, the whole thing, and I said, okay. And he goes, "You need a yardage?" I was like, "No." "Come on, Coach, you don't need me to give you anything? I've got an idea of where I'm at." "Oh, there's no way." And I said, "I'll tell you what I'll do." I said, "I'm going to hit this ball right now." I said, "But for the rest of the day, you can ask me, and I'll tell you what I think it is." And I said, "I bet you I'm within 5 yards of what your little machine says." "Oh, no, there ain't no way." All day long, I wasn't more than 5 to 7 yards off of what it said, shooting it with a laser. And he was like, "I don't understand how you do that." I grew up without that.
That's how I grew up.
I understand the feel of this game to be able to look out there and go, that's really more my 7-iron as opposed to my 5, or whatever. Mm-hmm. I was like, it's feel, and you have to learn that feel, and that's the same in every sport.
Well, remember when you were in school and you had to learn long division and math and multiplication tables and all that? Because our teacher said we weren't going to be able to carry a calculator around.
I was going to say that. But there it is right there.
They were wrong about that. But we still know how to do it.
Yeah, because you needed to learn how to do it.
Yeah, of course.
I mean,
it's kind of like when you go to that baseball field and you see 315 down the line, you say, nah.
I don't know anybody who would put numbers out there that aren't true. I don't know anybody that would do that.
All right, the torpedo bats.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I wanted to ask you about that. What is the deal with that?
What are you taking on this?
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. It's just like, so the golf clubs, you would agree, have gotten better through the years. Absolutely. When people say who was better, Nicklaus or Woods, it's not even really fair to say.
Yeah, because Tiger's equipment's so much better.
Right. It's the same thing. They've watched your hit. They've broke down where your contact point is, and now they're moving the barrel to where that is.
Yeah, they've allowed the barrel to be just like a
bottle bat.
Close to it.
Yeah.
But it still meets the.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they were saying.
It's legal.
So the teams that haven't used it, and let's call it the Brewers, it's illegal.
Yeah, they have a problem with it.
They have a problem with it. Is Judge good enough to be the all-time best Yankee that ever came
Ooh,
through?
wow.
Oh my God!
See, now you're gonna get the old man in me going, "There ain't nobody better than Mickey Mantle," even though that was before my day.
Well, okay, then before them, there was people that rivaled Mickey Mantle. Now he's got to stay healthy.
Yeah, but Mickey Mantle on 2 good knees.
He's got to stay healthy to be out there. But is he not capable of going down as that guy?
He dropped that line drive. He dropped that fly ball in the World Series.
I did. I saw that.
Yeah,
I did. But in
he's
his
a freak.
defense, he fair catched.
And he's way behind in the ring count.
Way behind in that. So there's an awful lot of stuff that goes into that. But I don't know that we've ever seen a player like him. that kind of size. What is he? 6'7"?
Yeah.
Like 280?
Looks like
and naturally,
basketball
when,
player.
Yeah.
naturally, with
Offensive
guys,
lineman.
when Roof was in the lineup, he was the guy, and when Mantle come along, he was the guy.
Babe Ruth was a fat old man with little girl legs.
Yeah, but they've had plenty of those guys that get in their lineup as the guy.
Yeah.
Yes.
But let's be honest, this guy stays healthy. In the last few years, he's managed to do that, and what the numbers he puts up when he's healthy.
Yeah.
I think you might make the argument someday, and it might be 10 or 12 years out, that somebody looks back on that and says, that's the best pinstriper that ever played.
Could-
And he's
could
got
be.
the numbers to show it.
He and
does.
I probably disagree on who I think the best pinstriper of all time is, because to me it's the one that gets the least amount of credit.
Ooh.
I think it's Yogi.
Yogi is very
I mean,
underrated.
you know, 8 World Series.
You seen that special on him?
Yes, the whole. I mean, how many MVPs? 4 MVPs? 3 MVPs?
I don't even remember.
I mean,
That Netflix special on him,
good.
it'll make you cry.
Yeah, his granddaughter's the one that she's the main author
So
in all
good.
of it.
And he
yeah.
played so much before our opportunity to
Yes.
really watch him
Yes.
play. We know how dominant those eras of Yankee teams were. I mean, 1 through 9 was better on the Yankees than 1 through 9 with anybody else.
Yeah.
Okay, and so that led to World Series.
But imagine that Yogi was probably back there calling every one of those games for every one of those pitchers out there on that mound
and some
for
people
him.
right now would tell you that Jeter's best of all time, and I don't know that that's true.
I don't think so.
But I think people are
Oh,
so
no, I mean-
infatuated with his ability.
I agree with that. He's a shortstop for the New York Yankees.
Yeah.
You know, good looking guy, all that kind of stuff. But he's not even close. Not even close in my mind.
Yeah,
I don't even think he's the best shortstop of his generation.
It's the whole, you know,
who was?
Was it Sheila that said, "What have you done for me lately?" It's that whole idea. It's, you know,
Was A-Rod a better shortstop?
yeah.
Yes.
Just had to move over?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, they took a guy who was better and moved him to a position because of who Derek Jeter was.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he was willing to do it.
And he was willing to do it. to
Could you
play for the
imagine
Yankees.
how the Yankees fans
Yeah.
would have reacted
Oh,
had,
God.
had you forced Jeter to move?
Let me ask you this. There's going to be, in my opinion, there's going to be some of these guys that have been left out of the Hall of Fame get there someday, even if it's the players' vote. Because what they say that, you know, that Bonds and Clemens and them did wrong. I mean, Rose is going to get in. I said he would when he died, and he is going to get in.
Even he said that. I heard him say that.
Yeah, I mean, and so he is going to get in, but A-Rod and his numbers are Hall of Fame numbers. 2 of those were after the rule was put in place. That's a little different than those other ones that never really even got caught.
Right.
Just got accused.
Yeah. Right.
And accused from the point of believing. I think they would have been better off just to admitted it and said, hey, well, it wasn't a rule anyway.
Well, Andy Pettit did. And he said he was sorry. Does he get lumped in with all that when people talk about it regularly?
No.
Not really.
No, we don't.
Because he owned it.
I think those guys could
They
have
don't really
done
talk about Palmeiro all that much either. You know, I mean, he
stood there.
shook it, but I mean,
Yeah.
But they did it
but his
prior
name
to
wasn't
the
big enough
rule.
for the
Right.
whole thing.
Now,
So-
A-Rod came after the rule and was caught twice.
Yeah. Here's my problem with keeping Bonds and I can't stand Barry Bonds, so it's not that. But he's the best player I ever saw.
You ever seen
He's
anybody hit from the left side any better than that guy?
No. I mean, I love Griffey's
Griffey has a
tools.
pretty swing.
Yeah, but Barry Bonds is the best player I ever saw. And but here's what I ask people all the time when they want to talk bad about Barry Bonds. How many pitchers did he face that were also on steroids? And they all say, well, I don't know. And I'm like, well, then why are we penalizing him? Because
Exactly.
there's a bunch of them.
Absolutely.
Because there's people that said 75% of the league was at PEDs at some point in time.
Sure.
If you believe that, you have to believe Bonds faced a lot of those guys.
Oh, yeah.
Why didn't that, like algebra, just cancel each other out and go, okay?
What
Absolutely.
did Bonds or not Bonds? I saw something with Maddox not long ago talking about Bonds, and he said in those later years, Bonds was basically getting 1 to 3 pitches the entire night.
Yeah.
And he didn't
And
miss
he
it.
no, and that's what he said. He goes, he was getting about 3 pitches a night, and he would hit all 3 of them.
Yeah.
And at least one of them would probably be out.
Yeah.
And I've said this too, and they were during their peak of their era. Bonds forced you to throw the ball to the plate, and when you did, he hit it.
Yeah.
Pujols did the same thing from the right side.
Yep.
Now, if you want to think of Pujols at the end, no, that wasn't the Pujols.
Not the guy that got
I'm
struck
talking
out
about.
by Matzik, and not that guy.
Not that
Yeah,
guy. I'm
yeah.
talking about when he was really healthy and in his 8-9 year prime there.
In St.
He was the
Louis.
exact same way. He forced you to throw the ball to the plate. He got where he chased late, either because he was slow and he had to jump out there and then he could get fooled on off-speed stuff.
Yep.
But that happens to a lot of folks. Consequently, it didn't happen to Bonds, but he just got mad and quit.
Yeah.
But they both forced you to throw it in the zone, and then they didn't miss it.
They did not miss.
And I always said Pujols reminded me of Bonds just from the other side during his
They were both.
greatness.
They were the best.
I
They were the
feel
best.
like that Bonds lately, me and Scott talked about this not long ago. I feel like Bonds, and I don't know that necessarily he's actively a part of it. I think Ken Golden is actively a
You saw
part
that?
of this. I feel like they're trying to rehab his image a little
think so,
bit.
too.
I really feel like by putting some of these collectibles out there, by him sitting down for some interviews and then
Yep.
them showing him on the show and him
Yep.
being so personable and everything. I think they're trying to soften. They know that older generation ain't gonna let him in there.
Right.
But I think they he still was in such phenomenal shape that he's gonna live to be an old
I still
man.
say this when they both get up there and they go to make their acceptance speech. Be wary.
Oh,
It may not be a
Clemens
bunch
is
of
the
nice
one that I
stuff
would be
come out
scared to
either one of
listen
them's
to.
mouth.
Yep.
And I'd understand that.
I would too.
So they better be
feel like-
prepared.
I feel like
With that
A-Rod doesn't do himself any favors.
He does not.
Because he just has such an unlikable personality.
He is infinitely unlikable.
God, but I mean, to listen to him talk about the game, he's fascinating.
He is.
He's very good about.
But
talking
then to
about it.
ask him anything, what's your favorite ice cream? You're probably not going to enjoy that conversation.
Right.
He's just, and it's, I don't know
Guys,
if it's the
he got a
soothing tone that he speaks in or what. He's just,
And he got
oh.
a contract that I think it was. I know it was the last year, but it might have been the last 2 years. The Yankees said, "You're leaving, and we're going to pay you.
What we mean is,
You're not going to be here, but you're still going to get the money because we got to do that."
you got to go.
We
you
just
ain't here.
we just want rid of you. We will pay you to
Well,
leave.
Torrey even moved him down in a World Series thing. I mean, and this takes a little gonads in that respect. I mean, you move your traditional 3-4 hole to the 8 because he couldn't hit the baseball during a pivotal time.
Yep.
You remember him talking about that on whether that was going to go over well?
Yep. I remember. And A-Rod, talent-wise, it's hard to name a lot of players that had more talent, but golly, he's just not a likable guy at all.
I think with
He
what he's
doesn't make
tried to
good
do
decisions either.
on Fox, I think he's tried to polish up his image from not being liked.
Like he said, when he starts talking about baseball,
He does know.
He's
baseball.
fascinating.
yeah,
He knows.
I mean, and I'll give him credit. The night that they were at Rickwood Field and Reggie started talking, I read that basically Poppy and A-Rod would have pretty much punched someone if they'd have tried to come off that shot. They were like, they were more or less like, you are not taking this camera off Reggie. You're going to let him sit here and tell this whole story.
and it was awesome.
Oh, my God. If you didn't have chill bumps and tears in your eyes watching that,
For sure.
then you're not a sports fan.
For sure.
I mean, we all have that gift to be able to look back on that and realize how terrible some of that time was. We don't have the gift of experiencing what those men experienced.
Right.
And when you hear, I love seeing, on the Ken Burns baseball, listen to guys like Buck O'Neill talk about, Satchel Paige and people like that and hear those stories. But no, just like right now on the TVs that are around us, I've got the Celtics documentaries playing.
Those are so good.
Oh, they're great. But when you go back and you let them, you hear the stories about the way the city of Boston treated Bill Russell when he was first. I mean, there's a reason why Boston's road uniform says Celtics and not Boston. I mean, that part is. It's just difficult for the modern generation
Me
to
and
understand.
Rusty was having this conversation before you got here, and neither me or you are huge NBA fans, but I'm gonna give
You're gonna like
credit
this.
when it's due. And to this day, is there a more important rivalry than Lakers Celtics? It's not out of the NFL. So that comes back to baseball, and the only thing I think of is Yankees and whoever you're trying to put them against.
Yeah.
Is that we love the fact, I think the country loved the fact that they saw Dodgers Yankees last year.
Yeah.
They got what they wanted.
Yeah.
Most likely we may see it again, unless somebody just doesn't live up to what they're being paid.
Right.
We'll see it again. But does that rival Lakers Celtics?
I don't think it does.
I don't think it does either.
And somebody would immediately say Red Sox Yankees. Well, they play too many times.
Yeah, they play a lot.
It's kind of takes some of that off of that.
The Dodgers and the Giants and the Dodgers and the Padres hate each other.
Yeah.
They have fights out in the parking lot.
Okay, so I'm looking at some of the. While you're talking, I'll play Scott. Okay, so
Stat guy.
Yeah, this goes all the Celtics Lakers rivalry goes all the way back to November of 1948.
Yeah, pretty old.
376 total meetings, 210 to 166 in Boston's favor. That's not a huge, huge advantage. Boston's up 167 to 135 in the regular season series. Postseason 43 to 31. Boston has the longest win streak over the Lakers with 18.
Wow.
But finals history against one another: 59, 62, 63, 65, 66, 68, 69, 84, 85, 87, 08, and 2010. That's the conversation right there.
Yeah, agreed.
Because they met each other that many times for the World Championship. In that respect, one or the other won all, and there's 34 total titles between the two of them.
And I don't know if you can Google this, but it'd be interesting to know, because we're ruling out the NFL. It doesn't have a rivalry that, in my opinion, we talked about the Cowboys and Steelers, but that's been long gone. It hadn't carried itself.
There was a time.
It was a time. But it's been long gone. I said to Rusty, if the Celtics and the Lakers was to get in the NBA Finals, it skyrocketed in ratings again.
Oh yeah,
just because there are those two teams.
I wouldn't watch.
Even if the Celtics, when the Celtics or the Lakers make the title, because Boston played for it last year.
It's one half of that watch,
and you cranked up the viewers quite a bit more.
It's one half of that watch at least.
I did get to go to the Garden this year.
I'm going to try to do that this summer. We're going up there.
Went up there and watched them play the Hawks. Funnily enough. I could drive.
Go all the way up there.
Yeah, go all the way up there.
It's like travel baseball.
And Trae Young has the game of the century against us that night. But it is what it is.
Well, to Google that and see who did the Yankees play in the World Series
the most? It's the Dodgers, I think.
Yeah, but it may not be nowhere near the amount of times you just gave Lakers and Celtics.
I wouldn't think so. It's But it's probably the biggest rivalry, and again, it's the two biggest markets too. So,
all right, Tennessee baseball, amazing what that hire has done.
Yeah,
you got to give that boy his due.
Oh yeah,
and he's losing players to the draft, and he's replacing
with all sometimes better players. I went up to see him play Florida in Game 3.
Did you?
And they started 5 freshmen in that game. 5 freshmen. Now, they'd already won the series, but still it's an SEC game, including the pitcher, 5 freshmen in an SEC game against Florida. What? And their recruiting class is even better.
And I didn't know that the young man that pitched for Northwest, who went to Florida as a freshman, has transferred to Auburn. His dad.
Yeah.
Coaching down at Calhoun
so...
now.
I've forgotten his name.
Because
he went to Florida, I've forgotten his name.
Between the Brooklyn Dodgers and Los Angeles Dodgers, the Yankees played them in the World Series 14 different times. So that's
a
lot.
That's quite a bit.
That's still the argument. Yankees Dodgers.
Yankees Dodgers would be is probably your closest argument to Celtics Lakers.
But I don't know if there's is there the fan hatred that goes on between those?
Not now. There was at one time, because when the Dodgers were fresh out of Brooklyn and gone to L.A., that hatred was nasty
because they were neighbors.
Same thing with the Giants, but now it's now it's not a big deal because you're so many generations removed.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't even think of. There's not an equivalent NFL rivalry because of the way the league works.
The NFL wants everybody to be.
Everybody they want everybody to go 8-8, 9-7,
right.
and
yeah. And when I think back, we do think back of you also those Raiders Steelers were important. But everybody in that NFL East, Rusty. I mean
NFC East. Yeah.
NFC East, the Cowboys.
Oh,
and
Cowboys,
whoever
Eagles.
they played, and Washington in their day.
Cowboys,
very
Redskins,
good.
Cowboys, Eagles. Cowboys, Eagles is probably.
I think Cowboys Redskins was.
And
I still call
At
them
one
Redskins.
time it was
They are the
I know I
Redskins.
get
They are the
penalized for
Redskins.
saying things like that.
They are the Reds.
the family of the man on the helmet's trying to get it. They're trying to get it changed back
It'd
because
be one thing if they put it out there ugly, but it was
they
a
don't.
tribute.
No, I agree.
Well, that was, in my opinion, that was weak ownership that caved.
Well,
Because
that guy was
he wasn't staying anyway.
he was maybe the worst owner in the history of sports.
He wasn't staying anyway.
You got one that's pretty
I
bad.
got one that I would
You got one that's pretty bad.
I would nominate him in a second. But,
You do have one that's pretty bad.
gosh.
Well, if it's the one I'm thinking about,
Well, of course it is.
The guy's tremendous about making a buck. He just won't relinquish.
He's
the
also
fact that
tremendous
he's not
about blowing his own horn.
He's
too.
How
not
many-
the smartest guy
Yeah.
in the game.
How many owners after a game go get in front of the media?
Nobody.
Just one.
Yeah, I mean, he's the one.
Yeah.
How many owners have their own radio show every week?
Just one.
I mean,
Arthur Blank. You see him, but of course, let's not use the Falcons as some sort of model franchise.
No.
But he's not in the way. The Falcons were bad before Arthur Blank bought them. That's a mess of a franchise.
Well, what needs to happen there, and it hasn't happened under his watch. He needs to roll front office out,
yes,
and that's where he needs to do that.
Stop making the decisions.
And let somebody new come in there and see if Titans.
Yeah.
Titans are the same way.
Same way.
They're terrible at the top.
Terrible.
She inherits the team, and she just
but
doesn't know how to choose people.
the problem,
And they're still making money.
yeah. The
Well,
problem
I mean,
with
they're
it
building
all
a beautiful
is
stadium.
you can't. There's no right or wrong way to build these teams. The money is at a point now to where the average Joe looks at a professional athlete and I can't believe they're paying him money like that. But if you understood what the owner is making off that franchise,
Right.
you'd understand, like, for a lot of those guys, that's not even a drop in the bucket
Right.
of what, it goes back to, Jerry Jones paid $334 million for the Cowboys, and the Cowboys are valued at $8.6 billion right now, give or take.
That's a lot.
Well, let me, you know what? And I've used this example before, but I'm going to use it again because it's such a great way to illustrate.
But he's
that.
also put himself in a very small club where he'll come around and pay for it.
How many seconds is a million seconds? How long is a million seconds? It's 11 and a half days.
More math.
Okay?
I was told there would be no money.
Yeah, there'd be no math. But how many days or how long is a billion seconds? It's 34 years.
Wow.
11 days versus 34 years. That's the difference in a million and a billion. And we talk about, well, they're paying Otani all that money they're paying him, are they?
Yeah.
I mean,
Because they're making a lot of money back off of
he-
that.
He's making about
also that
a
contract's
few million a year. I mean,
that contract's deferred. That owner was to sell that thing before it comes due. Somebody else going to have to take it. But what Jerry's done in value, now he's eliminated a lot of folks that could be an owner of the Cowboys.
oh yeah, because of the value. Yeah, but see, the other thing too is what I wonder is I would like to know how many of the contracts that some of these players get does the owner use the stock of the team as leverage to be able to pay that player, to where then if something goes wrong, the owner can just take the loss and write it right off like it's nothing. But how many of them can do that?
Most people say,
And there's a lot of them that probably have a way to figure some of that part out.
you probably heard this before. If you're a billionaire and you got the funds to
Yeah.
buy a franchise, don't do it. It's the worst way to spend your money. Now, if you were a multi-billionaire,
We mean if.
Yeah.
well, if you told the rest of the world,
Yeah.
would you buy a franchise?
I don't know.
There's other ways to take that money
Yeah.
and be greater at it
Yeah.
than managing all this.
Yeah.
But would you like to own a Major League Baseball team if it was your money?
I mean, I would, but just because I would want to be at the park, I would want to have all the things. But if the financial side of me was like,
there's a big to do on the financial side of it.
You'd enjoy more being a general manager,
yes,
than you would.
But being the owner of it and it's my money, no, probably not.
Well, they say it's the worst way to spend your millions.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But yet people do buy those things, and you know, I think Cuban flipped a buck on that. So, I mean, so if you want to get in there and stay long enough, you can accomplish that. But during the time of you playing owner, you might have been able to take that money and done something different.
Yeah, and made yourself a lot more money
in an easier for
the amount of them that get into it. And Jerry Jones is a great example of it. Jerry Jones is somebody who played football and thinks that makes him an expert at football.
Oh.
That's the worst part of his situation over there.
He's also though, he's a toy collector. You know, I can't just and because the Cowboys draft well and have drafted well for years. But instead of just trying to hang on to what we got, well, you know, there's T.O., there's Deion Sanders, there's, you know.
But I also heard somebody criticize him the other day that he, and this is somebody that's not a general manager, but it would be somebody thinking like a general manager. Like he says he waits too late to have to give them all the money.
Oh, he does.
Mm-hmm.
And he constantly does that. He puts them off until he has to overpay them.
When you could take a guy like, you know, Dak Prescott, that first year he came out, he goes 13-3 as a rookie quarterback. You could have locked him down that very next year for a fraction of what you could have locked him down 3 years later.
He's a great example. How much money they're paying?
Oh, they're paying him way too much money.
Guy that can't even get him to a playoff game.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the part where I don't think I would like it is, especially if you were a vocal owner like that, is I believe I would get tired of hearing my name raked over the coals every day in whatever respective city that I lived in. That would get old and get old fast. I don't think I could deal with that.
I had a friend who coached football, but he was not the head coach. He was a position coach, an offensive coordinator. I'm not going to say. But I asked him one time what it was like to coach with so-and-so. And that person said, I don't really get to coach. I just take the toys out of the box. And that sounds like what people do for Jerry Jones.
Yeah.
He doesn't really get to coach. They just take the toys out of the box.
Yeah. And make sure they don't kill each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, before we round up baseball, are you keeping up with high school?
Not as much. You know, I know there's one team that's doing really well, but I know the first rule of Fight Clubs, you don't talk about that. And I talked to their coach, and I told him I'm not going to mention that. So we're not going to mention the run that they're on. I talked to both their coaches, in fact, 2 of them, and I said, man, I hope you keep going.
I'm glad you're on good terms there again.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
But besides that team, and me and Scott talked about them, and we looked at it, he said, I looked at their schedule. It's very much capable of running the table.
It is.
But
you know how hard that is.
It is hard. Yeah. It is because you're gonna catch somebody's best, and you might be throwing off on that situation. That's right. However, looking at a bunch of the other teams, I don't see a bunch of standout records.
No.
Now Baylor's record wins are starting to total up a little bit, but I just don't see a bunch of teams that are usually with really solid records.
I agree. I mean,
that's what I've seen.
I'll say what you're saying, and I'll just say it in a different way. Baseball's down in this area. It's down overall, and that's why you have some traditional teams that are doing really great. They're not doing really great. So, are we going to have deep runs this year?
Probably not.
Not for many.
Well, just looking at those records and saying, okay, I don't know how that's all of a sudden going to have magic for that team, you know, when they start to play better teams.
Right. So Baylor has played. So what happened with Baylor is they front end with a lot of hard teams, and now when they're playing in some of their region games, they're not as hard. And Baylor's certainly got great talent. McCauley, unfortunate, their best player got hurt, and he's out for the whole year.
Uh-huh.
So that will wreck you.
Yes.
And they don't have a whole lot of pitching depth at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you know, that's kind of important.
And that series is coming up in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I saw they're playing a game at AT&T. Is that right?
I think the third.
Why do you think? What do you think's behind the downturn right now? Do you think some of it? Rob and I were talking earlier, and and I don't want to get into like a big philosophical thing on select and all that kind of stuff, but at the same time, it almost seems like
he knows what you're talking about because he's seen both sides of it.
There's a lot of kids that are out there that probably could be pretty good baseball players, but don't get an opportunity to be baseball players because there's not the same amount of, like when we were all kids, when you could go up to PRA, pay $25, get a hat and t-shirt, and you provide your own equipment, and you play, a summer, maybe all-stars if you do really well, but, the game is not as accessible as it used to be.
That's for sure
some of it,
part of it, which, of course, goes towards the collapse of rec baseball.
Yeah, total collapse.
And with select baseball, or travel, whatever you want to call it, and I coach one of those teams. Tyler and I coach the team. We've coached them this is our 4th year.
And you know the difference in this level?
Yes.
This level and
yes.
this. And I happen to be part of, I won't say the number pioneer first team, but I think I was in that 5-year window of when travel ball was being pioneered around here. The philosophy was to take one team per age group and compete with Atlanta, Knoxville, and Nashville.
Right.
Okay? Not to take 22 teams in an age group and
absurd.
Compete between Dade County and Cleveland.
It's absurd.
Put
and then everybody gets a ring every weekend.
That drives me.
It's absurd. We practice these kids, but we only practice once a week because kids are from everywhere. It's not like when I was growing up playing PRA, if you had practice, well, everybody lived within 5 miles, so everybody was going to be there.
Yeah.
That's when you had practice.
Sure.
And we got a lot better through practice. Now all they're doing is playing games. How you get better doing that? I mean, you can get better, but where are you developing your skills? Well, this guy goes to this hitting coach, and he goes to this pitching coach. Well, who's coaching defense? Well, he's got, it's not, we're all over the place. Somebody has decided and somebody figured out that you can make a lot of money doing this, and I've made a lot of money doing lessons and such. But kids don't practice. Imagine, if you will, a high school team around here, any of them, only playing. You play a game, and then you only have one. You play 3 games and you have 1 practice. Then you play 3 games and you have 1 practice. How good would they be?
Did you see this? When you know you're in Georgia,
not as well as if you're practicing 3 times playing 1 game.
1 game.
Did you have the complications of what I saw in Georgia? Was you had more practice time than Tennessee
in high school?
Yeah,
you do,
because Tennessee was playing more ball
games.
They
play more games,
and so the practice
in a shorter amount of time
got cut off.
Yep,
and there was more practice time in Georgia. Back then.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. There's more practice time. They start too soon. Everybody starts too soon. But you do get to practice, or my experience was you got to practice a little longer in Georgia than you did in Tennessee.
Well,
Tennessee plays
you
games.
take Chattanooga. When the season starts, if you want to, you can play in a tournament every weekend.
Yeah, and the tournaments, they do that because those count 3 games. It's been a long time, so I don't know if this is still a rule, but you could play 5 games and it only counts 3.
That's right.
In Georgia, every game counts.
Every count.
So you can't do that.
Okay, as a former coach and still current coach, back me up on this as well. You would rather have a kid that plays multiple sports as just one that plays baseball all year long.
Absolutely.
I don't know how many times I've said that till I'm blue in the face. Because I get this a lot because my daughter plays volleyball and my daughter plays golf and my daughter manages the wrestling team, and so I get a lot of, well she doesn't play A5 travel such and such. No, she doesn't. Yeah, we choose to have weekends as a family.
Yeah.
We choose to take trips and stuff. We don't choose to revolve our lives around what motel I got to stay in all weekend because my kid's playing in a tournament that means absolutely nothing.
So you get to Birmingham and play another team from Chattanooga.
Yeah, I mean,
baseball and softball a lot like that.
And as I've also said it a million times, it does not matter what sport it is, at what level it is. Talent is talent, and if you're good, somebody's going to find you.
Sure.
You will go to a camp. You will go,
Competing is what matters.
Yes.
But also using different muscles matters.
Yes.
And that's another reason we have so many arm injuries. But I'll tell you this story. When I was at Calhoun, I was sitting at the lunch table with Hal Land. You might have heard of him. He's a pretty good coach.
He's pretty decent.
And he said, Greg, I hear you don't like your baseball players to play other sports. And I said, where'd you hear that? And he goes, I just heard that. I said, well, first of all, don't believe everything you hear about me. And I said, but I'll just give you this one piece. I said, I have one son, and he plays football, basketball, baseball, and he's a black belt in taekwondo. I said, that's my own house.
Yeah.
He plays different sports. We're not playing the same sport year round. Tyler, when he got to McCallie, he didn't want to play football. And I told him he was going to play football. Number one, it's a business decision because of the money that he received.
2 sports.
You're going
Yeah.
And he's an impact player in 2 sports.
Yeah.
And I said, you're going to play football. I said, aside from that, I said, Tyler, I'm going to tell you something. I'm a baseball guy, but I recognize how things are. I said, and they don't write books and sing songs and make movies about Tuesday afternoon baseball games. But they have TV shows called Friday Night Lights.
Yeah.
And they wrote books about that.
Yeah.
And there's songs about that.
Yeah.
And I said, those are the memories you're going to hold on to forever. Sure, it was great that we won a state championship, but not everybody gets to do that.
Yes.
If you want to get Tyler fired up, get him to talk about McCallie Friday nights.
Oh, I bet.
Get him to talk about coaching Ringold Friday nights.
I think you might have pushed him to doing something that he didn't want to do, but I know for a fact he appreciates that now.
Oh,
because to miss out on Friday nights, and when you've ever been a part of it, the guys that don't do that don't realize what they are missing.
No,
and
I didn't play.
And just because you didn't play, just because you played football doesn't mean that some of that can't help you at the game that you're going to be the best at.
Absolutely.
You really can.
Absolutely.
You really can. If nothing more, understanding a little, bringing that teammate across to another sport. And when you don't do that, you just kind of know this one sport.
Yep, that was me.
You just know this. You just know this. You don't understand that the way that could have benefited you. And even though baseball is going to be your ticket, that's fine. But I think there's a slight turn in this. I'm not sure about this.
I hope so.
I think there's a slight turn because there's been so much negative conversation about you just being a one-sport kid. And you putting all your marbles in that.
Well,
and some people have come out and said, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
I will tell you what.
I do think you need to work at the sport you're going to be
Sure.
good at.
Of course.
I will share a conversation that I had, and I won't identify the person I had it with. Rob, I was telling Rob about this earlier. I was talking with another coach in the area in my sport. We were talking about why it's so hard for us to find golfers in this area. There's a number of reasons, but one of the things we always talk about is how when we can find the kids that are former baseball players, typically turn into pretty good golfers because there's a lot of the
Not everyone,
but some of the same mechanics and stuff are kind of in there and everything, and it kind of, especially if you can find pitchers and stuff that are more thinkers and things like that. We talked about a lot of that, but one of the things this other particular coach was saying, he said, the problem for us is, he said, most of the time if we get a former baseball player, he said, we don't get them until they're freshmen or sophomores in high school, and they finally get ticked off and stop playing. And I said, what do you mean by, getting ticked off? He goes, well, think about it. He said, you have a lot of kids. He said, the way that select ball is now, he said, which, like what we've said, it's not really select ball. It's more like it's glorified rec ball. Mm-hmm. And he said, so you got a kid that has had smoke blown up their butt their entire life because that particular program needs that extra 1,800, 2,000, 3,000, whatever it is for them to play. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden they get to a coach like you at high school, and you're going to take the 25 best guys you got, and this kid who's always been told how awesome he is ain't one of the 25 best kids you got, and then they have to go find something else to do. Mm-hmm. And I agreed completely because I'm like, yeah, that's 2 or 3 of my best players are kids that decided that they no longer wanted to play baseball and came to play for me. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that that's necessarily I'm not saying it's a downside or an upside either way. I mean, it's a plus for me because I get some athletic kids out there.
Yeah.
But it's also a downside because there's so many of those kids that might have benefited from doing all these other things that they could have done, but instead they played travel ball that goes year round
in the fall.
When
the spring,
when
the
they
summer.
could have when they could have tried basketball, they could have played soccer, they could have played golf, could have tried tennis.
Are the week travel teams going year round too, or are they just getting in that spring Easter egg hunt time, and when it's over, it's over. Do they?
I saw some pretty weak teams in the fall too.
I was going to say there's fall ball and everything. I mean,
If we would just get back to select at the youth level, back to the way it was. I remember John Riley. John Riley was one of the first guys. I'd never heard of select baseball until with younger guys.
Okay,
but,
John was
Boynton.
a year behind us.
yeah,
And Boynton.
and maybe Drew Walker was on that
Drew
team.
would have been probably involved.
Yeah, and so I remember that, and he was telling me about going to Cookville and playing a lot, and I was like, I wouldn't want to do that. And now that's all anybody does.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me tell you where I think that where that started, and it started, and I can say it back in the pioneer days. The point being is, a group of daddies with good ball players wanted to play a better level of baseball, and they did not want to be handicapped by a program that had 1,012 rules to it.
Yeah.
And that you can protest and this and that. You just pay your money and go play the best baseball.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what we wanted to do.
And there's room for that.
And we
Yes.
wanted to not play the best baseball across the river. We wanted to go a couple hours away to see that.
Yeah.
And Lord knows we did. We enjoyed going to those places, even if the teams were better than us. We enjoyed doing that. And we say, oh, well, we need about 2 more players to compete with that.
Yeah.
And that was what that. But I think that program that was so dominant, and I think it's by the sources that are involved in it now, I think New Blood is trying to change that to an extent. But I think that's why there was such a reason of running away from that, because that organization wasn't embracing as it was to go, now this is what you dealt with. Well, where are we going to get a field at? Yeah, well, we don't get to go back to their field necessarily.
Right.
And we don't get to use their umpires necessarily. We got to go somewhere else. But the level of what you did, you didn't create any benefit in it.
No.
You just ran away from a league that had a bunch of rules to a league that just took your money.
But you talk about being in the pioneering days. When you were old enough to play baseball back in the day, there was how many select teams?
It was your all-star team.
Yeah.
That was it.
Or when you got a little bit older, weren't you?
Oh, at Boynton with Frank.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
you had and then you had the Chattanooga Colonels for a short time.
Well, and no
Yes.
disrespect.
And that was-
prior to that, there was some post leagues.
Some post leagues.
Yeah,
And
but I mean,
that was
yeah, I remember the
that type
post
of ball.
leagues.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember as a kid playing at PRA, coming up through the T-ball and everything, getting to kid pitch and everything, and the only thing I wanted was one of those pinstripe uniforms that represented all the banks had a team.
Yep.
Community Federal, Northwest Georgia,
Fort Oglethorpe State Bank, which
Fort
turned into
Oglethorpe
Capital.
and then there was like 5 of them, I think, or 4 of them, 4 of them or 5.
Well,
of them.
Kiwanis had a team.
Kiwanis
too.
had a team. That's right.
Yeah.
They all had a pins, and you wore pinstripe jerseys with high socks, and that was like for a little kid.
That's a big deal.
That was a big deal to look for. I remember the first time I made an all-star team and got called out to the middle of the field
Oh, yeah.
and handed one of those hats.
Yep.
Back in those days, a lot of people went home not having made that all-star team. And you know what?
And you got told in front of God and everybody.
That's
too.
right. And the next year, either you got better or you didn't make it again. I mean,
you talk, man, there's so many things that I think about that one. But, like, you talk about how that pinstripe mattered. And I remember when I was growing up, the fitted hat at LFO mattered. I wanted one of those. But Tyler, when he grew up playing in Chickamauga, he played rec until he was 8. And then we got out of that and started playing a little local stuff. We just kept the all-star team together. But he every once in a while, like in the league, it would be, well, there's the Dodgers, the Braves, the Reds, the Yankees, and the Trojans. And I'm like, why are we doing that? Like, as the coach of Gordon Lee, I want everybody to aspire to be Trojans. I don't want them to beat the Trojans growing up going, oh, I hate the Trojans. No.
Yeah.
I only wanted the all-star teams to be called Trojans, or not at all.
Yeah.
Don't use it at all. Let's make it reverent.
Yeah.
So I'm totally with you on that.
Also, back in those days, and y'all were slightly behind us, but most of the rec all-stars stayed traditionally with what was deemed the colors of that because Boynton was purple and gray.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think y'all were black and white.
It just depends. We had navy and red,
Or maybe, I
but
thought you was black and white.
when the Lookouts came back in '76, everybody was the A's, so we were green and gold. Our 8-year-old.
We
All-Stars.
were, I was trying to think. I think one year we were when I was 7 years old.
And East Brainerd was green and gold.
we were yellow and white,
Harrison was purple.
and then when I was 8 years old, we were blue and white.
Yeah, they kind of did.
Yeah,
go
they would
different
change
around.
it up
but
here and there.
Boynton, which was a very,
We
very
did have
large,
pillbox hats one year, though.
large league at the time, and their All-Stars programs were all pretty decently in every age group. Purple and white or purple and gray was their colors, but I noticed that after about 5 or 6 years after we left, they just kind of changed their minds on what their rec colors was, and I don't know if they had a vote on that or they just decided to go out there on their own.
Yeah.
And change that, but that was a good time with the All-Stars, but at the same time, that's where people started to grow a frustration too, Greg, about again the rules that piled up.
Yeah.
I saw this, and this went against a Boynton team several years ago. Kid was playing for Boynton on an All-Star team. Played the year before in Murray County. He didn't move. They lose that protest. That is garbage, my friend. I don't know what rule we had to put that in the book,
Yeah.
but that's garbage.
Yeah, where's your district? You got to pull from your
So
district.
you're telling that family who wants to leave one rec for a better rec in their minds,
Sorry.
they got to
And they're
move. They got to sell their house.
To play rec ball.
They got to sell their house to do that.
Yeah, I don't think
That's
so.
wrong. That's right, and that's why select. That's just an example, but
Yeah.
that's a good example.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like the Rex were just victimized by it. They caused a lot of their own trouble.
no.
Oh yeah, they were a product.
And
of
then
their
they
own
put
making.
another rule on top of that rule. You
Yeah.
know.
Well, folks, we could literally sit here and expound on the intricacies of this all day long, but we're going to have to call it a show at that.
Baseball's fun to talk.
Baseball's always fun to talk. We appreciate
I'm
Greg
always in for that.
coming out and hanging out with us. We're going to get him back up here one day talk music because he's actually a musical expert as well. So, but we
I
appreciate.
like it. I don't know if I'm an expert.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys tuning in with us. We will catch y'all next time around. Hope you guys all have a great week, and we'll see you later.
Okay, Mr. Music Lover.
Well, the days are short and the nights are long. A room slowly fills with song. All I need is one reminder. Parkway Blue Blinders. Well, I begged and cheated and I borrowed for my life upon the road. I'm still looking for some gold at the end of my rainbow. Yes, and someday I will find her on a Parkway Blue Blinder. On a Parkway Blue Blinder. Someday I will find her. Yes, and someday I will find her on a Parkway Blue Blinder. On a Parkway Blue Blinder. On a Parkway. On a Parkway, on an autumn day. Yes, and leaves falling like confetti in a New York parade. On the Parkway, on an autumn day. Yes, and leaves race.